Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome all of you to the I-80 over the Mississippi River Bridge virtual public meeting. My name is Tracy Morse, and I will be facilitating today's meeting. We're very excited to have so many of you. In fact, hundreds of folks are participating today. The purpose of today's virtual public meeting is to introduce the study process, schedule initial findings, as well as to obtain your feedback on the issues or concerns and goals that the study team has identified. To start, I'd like to introduce our team of panelists representing the two joint departments of transportation and who have been leaders in their agencies for over 25 years. Becky Marufro from the Illinois Department of Transportation and Sam Shea from the Iowa Department of Transportation. On the engineering consultant side, we have Tony Pikeltis and Bob Magliola, from the Parsons Transportation Group. I'd like to turn it over to Becky from the Illinois Department of Transportation for a few opening remarks. Becky?
Thanks so much, Tracy. Thank you all who have joined us today to participate in this virtual public meeting. A few short weeks ago, our plan was to have an in-person traditional public meeting, but as all of you know, many of our lives have changed with the COVID-19 crisis. And with that, we wanted to be able to continue our work and continue the process of this project. And so this is the first virtual public meeting that the Illinois Department of Transportation has undertaken. And in addition to that, it's the first Pell study that we'll be talking about later, planning and environmental linkages that we've undertaken as well. We're very excited to be partners with the Iowa Department of Transportation for this project, as well as the Federal Highway Administration and our consultant team. And we have a lot of wonderful things to share with you today about the project. And just to let you know kind of the scope of who's participating today, we have over 500 participants in this meeting. That includes many local stakeholders and property owners, as well as participating agencies. There's at least 8 departments of transportation across the country who have staff listening in today, contractors, engineering consultants, suppliers, as well as state, local, and federal elected officials. So we're very pleased to have all of you here with us today. And on behalf of the Illinois DOT and the Iowa DOT, we welcome you and look forward to sharing with you today. Thank you, Tracy.
Mm-hmm. Over the next hour, we'll provide the study overview, provide ways for you and others that to stay involved in the study, and later on in the hour, we'll hold a Q&A session and talk about a post-meeting survey. So for some of you, this might be your first online meeting. For others, you may be veterans. So before we get started with the project overview, I'd like to run through just a few housekeeping items. As we go through today's meeting, I'm sure many of you will have questions. Feel free to provide questions at any time. However, we will answer them during the Q&A session. So how do you ask a question? So on your screen, when you joined the meeting, you should see a control panel. If by any chance that control panel is not already expanded, and it looks like step 1, you'll need to click on this orange arrow to expand your control panel. You'll see a question area here, which is an arrow. Click on that, and then this expanded area will show up. You'll type your question in this box as where my cursor is, and then push send. And lastly, if you are receiving audio from a phone, make sure your computer volume is turned up. So to kick off the study overview, we have a video that's approximately 8 minutes long, and that really provides a high-level synopsis of this study. So I will start that now before we get into a little bit more of the details of the study.
to today's public meeting. This meeting is being held to introduce the I-80 over the Mississippi River study and to receive your input. Initiated by the Illinois Department of Transportation in conjunction with the Iowa Department of Transportation and under the jurisdiction of the Federal Highway Administration, I-80 over the Mississippi River is an early-stage transportation study. The study will coordinate with stakeholders to identify existing and future transportation problems and needs in the study area. The project's purpose and need will then be used to develop transportation alternatives. This study is separate and should not be confused with a similar environmental study being conducted by the Iowa Department of Transportation that examines I-80 between I-280 and the river. In fact, the I-80 over the Mississippi River study area encompasses roughly 9 miles from the I-88 and I-80 interchange in Illinois to just east of the Middle Road interchange in Bettendorf, Iowa, and includes the bridge connecting the two states over the Mississippi River. The study follows the guidelines for the Federal Planning and Environmental Linkages Process, or PEL for short. A PEL is a collaborative approach to transportation decision-making. It brings together experts, community members, and organizations to consider potential improvements to the area's transportation network and what the resulting impacts would be. A successful PEL results in an early decision-making process between local, state, and federal transportation agencies that smoothly advances and transitions a project from its early transportation planning phase to the more detailed National Environmental Policy Act phase, referred to as the NEPA phase. In coming months, the project team will continue to identify and evaluate possible alternatives for transportation improvements within the study area based on the project's purpose and need. Those findings will be made available for public review and comment near the end of the PEL process, which is expected to conclude in late 2020 with a finalized report. Completion of the report will then allow the project to enter the NEPA phase, which IDOT also refers to as Phase 1 Preliminary Engineering and Environmental Studies. One of the first steps of the study is to identify existing conditions within the study area. This included the identification of roadway, bridge, traffic, and safety conditions, land use and zoning, and environmental, cultural, and socio-economic resources. So why is this all necessary? The I-80 bridge over the Mississippi River opened in 1966 and is one of 3 major interstate bridges in the Quad Cities. After repairs and rehabilitations over the years, the structure is reaching the end of its useful life. Its roadway features are outdated and traffic congestion is increasing with associated increases in truck and automobile traffic and crashes on the bridge. Those problems create recurring issues with the bridge condition, which in turn leads to costly expenses for bridge maintenance. The roadway design across the bridge does not meet current standards, and widening is not possible. In reviewing the existing conditions, we identified the following needs or problems. There are several areas where current engineering standards are not met, and traffic volumes will increase by 2045. Additionally, crash history indicates potential safety issues. Based on the problems we identified, the purpose or goal of the project may include considerations such as improving roadway design elements, reducing traffic congestion, and improving safety. As the study progresses, performance measures will be determined to ensure that the project's needs and goals are met. The avoidance or minimization of potential environmental impacts will be taken into consideration in the development and evaluation of project alternatives. The following environmental, cultural, and socio-economic resources have also been identified: streams, 100-year floodplains and floodways, wetlands, public parks, potential state and federal threatened and endangered species and habitat, prime farmland, cultural landmarks in Iowa, and archaeological sites in Illinois. You can find the details of these resources on the public meeting exhibit boards located on the project website. The alternatives will consist of a wide spectrum of possibilities and combinations, beginning with the option of implementing regular safety and maintenance efforts that do not involve any reconstruction or replacement, which is represented by the no-build alternative. Potential build alternatives may include rehabilitation to address design deficiencies, adding lanes to I-80, and modifying interchanges. Your input is critical to the process. Review the exhibits on the project website. Let us know about your experiences, what you are seeing, and what you believe are the greatest strengths and challenges to transportation in the study area. Comments are always welcome, and those received through May 6, 2020, will become part of the public meeting record. Thank you for participating in today's public meeting.
That was an overview of the project. So we'd like to drill down just a little bit more with details and findings of the project by going through a few exhibits before moving on to the Q&A session. Tony with Parsons Transportation Group will lead us through these details. Tony?
Thanks, Tracy, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to discuss the exhibit boards developed for this public meeting and provide a little more detail on the project. These boards are also posted on the project website and available for review there. First exhibit's the study location. Our study area runs along I-80 from the Interstate 88 interchange on the Illinois side to just east of the Mill Road interchange on the Iowa side. This includes the Interstate 80 bridge over the Mississippi River and the interchanges at Illinois Route 84 and US Route 67. The Iowa Department of Transportation is also conducting a study of Interstate 80 that extends from Interstate 280, which is west of our project and off the edge of this map, and to the Mississippi River on the east. The Illinois and Iowa Departments of Transportation are coordinating these two projects to determine the appropriate project limits on the Iowa side. Ultimately, the eastern end of the Iowa project will match the western end point of the I-80 Pell study. So what is a planning and environmental linkages study, or Pell is a term we'll use a lot? It's a collaborative and an integrated approach to transportation decision making. It considers environmental, community, and economic goals early in the transportation planning process, and it uses information, analysis, and products developed during planning to inform the preliminary engineering and environmental review process. Some of the benefits of incorporating environmental and community values into transportation decisions include on-the-ground outcomes. You can implement better transportation programs and projects that serve the community's transportation needs more effectively. Improved project delivery timeframes. You can minimize potential duplication during future phases of the project. And then there are relationship building benefits as well, as there are more opportunities for agencies to help shape transportation projects. A Pell can accomplish different things and be approached differently on different projects or by different agencies. The goal of this Pell is to develop the project purpose and need and to develop and screen alternatives. Typically, transportation projects in Illinois have three phases. Phase 1 is preliminary engineering and environmental studies. Phase 2 is final design and contract plan preparation. And Phase 3 is construction. For this project, the Pell was added as a preliminary step to get a jump start on the Phase 1 process. Developing the purpose and need and developing and screening alternatives are tasks that are typically not completed until you're into Phase 1. Our study timeline shown here shows that the study was initiated in December 2019. And we've reached the point now where we've evaluated existing conditions, identified problems in the study area, and have begun developing the purpose and need. Once the purpose and need is complete, we will identify possible alternatives and evaluate those alternatives to narrow them down to a set that will be retained for more detailed evaluation in the next phase of the project. This Pell study is scheduled for completion in September of this year. So in short, through this Pell study, we will accomplish the following. We'll identify problems in the study area, develop the purpose of the project to address those needs, develop alternatives that address the project's purpose, and evaluate those alternatives to determine which perform the best. Preliminary problems that we've identified in the study area are related to the bridge and design standards, traffic volumes, and safety. Following this public meeting and considering input from the public, we'll continue to evaluate potential problems in the study area. The I-80 bridge opened in 1966, so it's over 50 years old now. And as bridges get older, issues regarding the condition of the bridge become more frequent, and the cost to maintain the bridge increases. Additionally, this bridge does not meet current standards in terms of shoulder width and is not feasible to widen it. Beyond not meeting current design standards, the lack of shoulders creates additional issues. So when there are crashes or stalled vehicles on the bridge, these incidents can easily shut down one or both lanes of travel. Another part of our evaluation is an analysis of existing and projected traffic volumes. On this board, we're showing the daily traffic in vehicles per day along each section of I-80. The forecasted volumes are preliminary and will be updated as the project moves forward, and also will be coordinated with the adjacent I-80 project in Iowa. Along the interstate, there are these callouts, where the top number represents the existing daily traffic and the bottom number represents the preliminary projected 2045 daily traffic. And the percent increase is also shown in those callouts as well. Traffic operations are measured in terms of level of service, ranging from A through F. Similar to a grading scale in school, level of service A is the best and represents free flow conditions, no traffic congestion. And level of service F is considered the worst and represents a heavily congested condition. Along the corridor, the existing and future levels of service are identified by the green and yellow colors. Colors along the south and west side of I-80 represent existing conditions, and those along the north and east side represent the future conditions. Based on the preliminary analysis conducted, the worst projected levels of service in the study area are C and are shown around the Mississippi River Bridge and adjacent interchanges, and at the adjacent interchanges at Illinois Route 84, US Route 67, and also around Middle Road. We've also begun our evaluation of, did we go the wrong door? There we go. We have also begun our evaluation of crash history in the study area. This has included review of 5 years of crash data. This exhibit provides a summary of the data we're reviewing. Over the 5-year period evaluated, there are over 500 crashes in the study area and 3 fatalities. The crash data will be reviewed further as we move forward with the project to determine what might be causing these crashes and what improvements might be made to help reduce crash risk. As part of this public meeting, we are requesting your feedback in terms of what you see are the needs in the study area. After completing the purpose and need, alternatives will be developed. One alternative will be the no-build alternative. And as discussed in the video, this alternative includes routine maintenance and repair of the interstate and bridges to maintain traffic operations. And the no-build alternative is used as the baseline to compare other alternatives developed. Potential build alternatives will consider roadway and bridge improvements that address the problems we've identified in the study area. And these improvements could include rehabilitating I-80 to address design deficiencies, adding lanes to I-80, or modifying or improving interchanges. No specific project alternatives have been developed for the project yet. That work will commence based on the purpose and need for the project. So as we evaluate alternatives, we'll measure them to determine how well they address the purpose and need. Potential performance measures that we have begun to consider include providing a structurally sound bridge over the Mississippi River, reducing design deficiencies in the study area, improving traffic flow, and improving safety. Also, as mentioned in the video, this final exhibit shows some of the environmental resources in the study area. Potential impacts to these resources will be inventoried for each alternative that we analyze, and environmental impacts will be avoided or minimized to the extent possible during this evaluation process. And okay, with that, I've covered what we wanted to related to the exhibit boards. I'm going to turn it back over to Tracy to discuss some of the ways to stay involved as the project continues. And we really do look forward to answering your questions and taking your feedback at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Stakeholder involvement is really important in any transportation planning project, and will be robust here in this Pell study. There's various ways for folks to participate and stay involved throughout as the study progresses, and that's just, even starts with today's meeting. And those who couldn't participate in today's meeting will have the opportunity to view the public meeting materials on the project website. Other ways to stay involved include signing up for e-blasts, participating in community meetings where we're discussing the study, and take part in surveys and provide comments. At the conclusion of this virtual meeting, participants, all of you, will be sent a survey seeking your input on 3 very important questions we have regarding the issues, concerns, and project goals that we've identified that Tony went through and also were in the video. We encourage everybody to provide their comments throughout the study process on the project website. However, comments received by May 6th will become part of the official public meeting record. So for those of you that might have joined a little bit late, after we started, I just wanted to reintroduce our panelists. We have Becky from the Illinois Department of Transportation, Sam Shea from the Iowa Department of Transportation, Tony from Parsons Transportation Group, and Bob also from Parsons Transportation Group. And real quick, again, for those of you that might need a refresher or missed the beginning of the meeting, to ask a question, you should see a control panel that looks like this step 2 if you do not. And it looks like step 1, click on the orange arrow that will expand your box. Click on the arrow here that says questions, which will then expand here to this box. Type in your question and click send. So with that, I'd like to open up the question and answer session. We have received some questions already, which is great, and we'll pose those questions to our panelists. One other thing I'd like to mention, that we will answer questions that are related to the I-80 Pell study. If there are questions that are non-I-80 Pell related, we'd be happy to get those particular questions to the proper person who will respond to you separately. So let's see, we've got our first question is about a bike ped, multimodal. Could the bridge have have separated pedestrian and bicycle accommodations with viewing stations for local and visitors, with trailhead parking to and in Iowa and Illinois. So really questions about what are some multimodal options, and particularly for pedestrian and bicycle. I'm sure Tony or Becky, you want to take that one?
Sure, Tracy, I can start with that, and then Tony can pitch in as well. Both the Illinois and Iowa Departments of Transportation have a priority to ensure that we are accommodating all modes of travel on our projects and evaluating how we can best accommodate that. Now, typically, I think as most people know, on an interstate, we don't allow those modes of travel adjacent to the lanes. And so I understand the question is, what about a separated path? And I'm sure many people are familiar with the plans for the I-74 bridge that are just down the river, and that includes a separated path. At this point, in this early stage of the study, we're really looking at what are the problems and the possible alternatives that we might look at to solve those problems. And so, I think this is one of the concerns that we'll likely hear from a lot of local stakeholders, is that they are interested in seeing different modes of travel, non-motorized travel, being considered. And so that will be a consideration as part of the study. But at this point, we certainly haven't made any determinations as to whether there will be a replacement bridge, or what types of steps we'll be taking in the future. I think, kind of as Tony mentioned, no build versus build alternatives, and so it will be a consideration, but we don't have any determinations yet as to how that would move forward. So Sam or Tony, if you have anything you'd like to add.
No, I mean, I'd only add, and just to reiterate that, yeah, at this stage, I mean, we're at a point where we're gonna, look at all the issues and try to evaluate everything. So it'll definitely be something that we'll have to consider moving forward, but we don't know, we certainly don't know how all that's going to play out as we move forward.
And I think along
I
with
agree.
Sorry, Sam, go ahead.
I said I agree. I think it's Becky and Tony covered it well.
Sure. So an aspect to that, I think you answered that, Becky, but we had another person ask about a recreational path. So I think specifically the other one was specific on, on the bridge itself. Obviously you have your endpoints, but as far as the study area goes, including that would be inclusive with a recreation path throughout that study area corridor.
Yeah, certainly as we study there is a corridor under consideration at this point in the study, as we kind of showed as we went through the boards there. And these are the kinds of things that we'll be looking at throughout the project limits, as far as assessing what modes of travel need to be accommodated and how we would go about that.
Okay, we have a question in regards to the bridge itself. A really popular question. I think a lot of people always want to know is, so what types of bridges are being considered?
Okay, this is Bob Magliola with Parsons. I'll take that. So as it is right now, there's a couple of options on the table, and that is if the existing bridge is repurposed and reused in some manner, then the navigation channel that's out there now would the interested agencies would allow the navigation channel that's out there now to stay, and that navigation channel width can definitely handle a typical girder type bridge, and a girder type bridge that is like out there now, albeit a more modern girder bridge. If the existing bridge is to be replaced, then several of the interested agencies have expressed that they would like to see a wider navigation channel. And depending upon the width of that navigation channel that they, they would want, you might be able to still end up with a girder bridge if that navigation channel was in the 400s to maybe up to a 500-foot wide. If they wanted even a greater navigation channel, a truss type bridge or an arch type bridge, maybe even a cable stayed bridge would be in consideration. That type of determination would be made in not in this stage of the study, but in the next stage, and definitely we would be putting out. Typically, what would happen, we would have renderings put out of the possible alternatives. We would select public input on that, and then of course all the Illinois and Iowa DOT would weigh in on it, and so it would definitely be there's several ranges of opportunities, and like I say, a lot of it depends upon, do we need to increase the navigation channel, which is not a done deal or set at this point. I would suspect that if the navigation channel is not increased, we would stay with a girder type of bridge, because that's generally a very economical type of bridge to build. If you need more clarification, please ask a follow-up question. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. So the next questions there's a few different questions about the materials. Will the presentation slides be available online? And is this meeting being recorded? Certainly. Becky, do you want to answer that? I mean, I can certainly answer it too.
Oh, sure. Well, we can both contribute to that, but yes, all of the materials will be available on our website, which I think most who are connected to the meeting today accessed our website, but I-80 MississippiBridge.com, and we will have all of those materials out there for you to view, as well as the video. I know at least one of my colleagues said they were having a little bit of glitching while watching the video, so you'll have the opportunity to view that on the website later.
So actually, those materials are out on the website on the public meeting page right now. Okay, so next question has to do about funding and times. So can you talk about the funding of the project? Which phases are funded?
Sure, Tracy. I can.
The timing of those phases.
Sure.
They correlate.
So the Illinois Department of Transportation operates on a 6-year, multi-year program. And our program was most recently published, I believe it was last October. So it covered fiscal years 20 through 25. And Iowa DOT operates on a multi-year program as well. There's a slightly different than ours, but we try to do everything we can so that we're paralleling those projects, because in a project such as this, we're sharing those costs between the states and as well as with the Federal Highway Administration. So as of the last published program for the Illinois DOT, this project is funded all the way through construction. As far as timing, that is shown in the multi-year program. I think it's important to note that changes do occur to that program as we go through the process and determine what funding is available and what other transportation needs are present for the department, as well as for Iowa DOT, because once again, we work together to make sure that we're addressing those various projects that we share those costs in and coordinating our schedules. So currently we are in the Pell process, and we expect to move into the phase 1 process in relatively quick fashion within the next year. And as far as construction, we do expect that that would be several years away. But the first step is to evaluate what project needs there are and how we feel we can best address those, and to proceed through the environmental process for that purpose. Sam, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I would say you pointed out the differences between programs. I think Illinois has a 6-year multi-year program, and the Iowa DOT has a 5-year transportation program. The construction part of this is not yet funded in the Iowa DOT 5-year program because they're in the midst of the draft of the next year. I can't speak for our Transportation Commission, who sets those funding priorities, but I can say we've had multiple discussions with Illinois DOT. I think we've worked well together, and our Transportation Commission is aware of the Pell and where we stand with Illinois DOT as far as funding. So we'll see what they come up with. The final 5-year program will be out in June of this year. So I'm somewhat confident that this will be in there.
So regarding the level of service, or LOS for short, we talked about that. Does the future level of service assume no additional lanes, or does it assume there will be an additional lane in each direction? Tony, do you want to?
Sure, the forecasts, and again, I want to just reiterate that those are preliminary at this time, and will be updated and refined as we move forward. But those forecasts included there are considered no build forecasts, so they do not assume an additional lane of travel along I-80.
Okay. All right, how might, and this in regards to construction, so how might construction impact the use of the bike trail on the Illinois side?
Well, Tracy, I'll speak to that. Whenever we have construction projects, one of our many requirements is that we maintain access, whether it's through a detour or other access considerations during construction for pedestrian and bicycle routes. And so there are several different ways that that can be achieved, but the first thing we have to do is to figure out what kind of alternative are we looking at. There's certainly a wide variety of possibilities on the table at this point. In fact, really, we haven't determined any of those exact parameters. And really what we're doing right now is evaluating what are the problems and what would be the proper solutions for those problems. So I think as the Department of Transportation, we certainly have a significant value on those other modes of travel, as far as whether it's pedestrian or bicyclist, other non-motorized modes of travel, and is within our policies and our requirements that we find ways to assist in maintaining those modes during our construction projects.
Regarding to the new bridge and accidents, would putting a new bridge in with an additional lane greatly reduce accidents?
Tony.
Yeah,
Tony?
it's hard.
Tony,
Yeah. Yes. It's difficult to actually predict, how many crashes are going to occur. But what we do is we evaluate if there are deficiencies out there, and if those deficiencies seem to be causing crashes based on the data. And we're in the middle of that analysis, so we haven't completed that, that full crash analysis yet at this time. But some of the things you look at that might be causing crashes are poor, deficient design standards. So over the bridge, we discuss the lack of shoulders, right? And in other areas, there may be, some of the curves or the turns may be deficient. And if you have any traffic issues where there's congestion, all those things could be contributing to crashes. So we'll evaluate that as part of our study and try to determine countermeasures or roadway improvements that will hopefully reduce crash risk. We don't really get into the crash predicting business, but we're just looking at ways to provide a safer facility and then reduce the crash risk.
Tony, if I can add just a little bit to that, one of the things that nationwide we're trying to do is utilize the Highway Safety Manual, which is a relatively newer method, and looking at ways to predict what kind of improvements are going to be beneficial, and that's one of the things that we'll consider through that collision analysis.
So we have a question about multimodal. I know we talked about some as far as it's pedestrian and bicycles. Becky, do you want to maybe expand on if there's any other types of multimodal that has been either we've already received comments from some stakeholders or other things that will also be considered besides those two modes?
Well, pedestrian and bikes, I think, are the primary issues that we run into as far as accommodations on most roadway projects. Obviously, if there's railroad involvement, we also coordinate with them as well. In this case, we do have a rest area on the Illinois side that I know there's quite a bit of interest from people because it's got some pretty views over the river, and people enjoy going there and being able to watch the eagles or just watching other elements down the river. And of course, we have boats because we're on the Mississippi River and it's navigable waterway. There's a lot of use of barges to move elements up and down the river, and that's certainly an important part of what we'll consider. I think Bob mentioned in his discussion of bridge types that we do need to look at navigable waterways, and we've already begun coordination, very early coordination with some of our participating agencies, including the Coast Guard and the Corps of Engineers, as well as local agencies and local municipalities, as we look at different events and different needs as far as navigation on that waterway, and how we're going to make sure we accommodate that with whatever solution we might determine.
We often get a lot of questions, especially from folks that property owners around or in a study area. Becky might want to, and Tony add into this, but Becky might want to take this one. As a homeowner within the mile of the current bridge, my concern is the path of a new bridge, both as the final footprint and needs during the construction phase. So maybe you could talk about how that process will go. Give you some examples on how we've handled or Illinois and Iowa DOTs have handled the I-74 river bridge.
Sure. So I'm sure many people in the area have watched the I-74 process and know that it took many years. In fact, I think we could say decades from the beginning to where we are today. And certainly, our goal here is that this project will not take quite as long as that one did. In fact, Federal Highways has put some guidance in place to try to expedite some of the studies and the process so that we keep that information fresh as we're going through these projects. But certainly, when we look at environment doesn't only include fish and mussels and turtles and eagles and bats. It also includes people. And that's one of the reasons that we do these kinds of meetings and reach out early and often to the public and keep an open opportunity at all times for input to be received. because we do have a significant concern for how this or any project will affect people and their property. So at this point, we do not have any determinations of what an alternative alignment might be, or what a widened roadway might be, or even if widening is the proper solution throughout the corridor. We're studying those things, and impacts to property will certainly be a consideration. So as far as what might occur during construction, you know, at this point, to use the analogy of building a house, you know, we haven't even quite figured what piece of property we're going to purchase, let alone what the foundation or the house, whether we're going to build a ranch or a 3-story mansion. We haven't figured those things out yet, but we're going to continually be reaching out to the public and to stakeholders to make sure that there's lots of opportunity for input and consideration of any elements of this project. So Sam, I guess I'd open it to you from Iowa DOT if you had anything you wanted to add.
No, I think you did a really good job with that, Becky. We won't be able to make property or known property impacts until we know a possible alignment and the type of bridge and that sort of thing. So I think we're quite a ways away from that yet. And of course, like you said, there'll be multiple public involvement opportunities between now and then.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And you know, I just want to reiterate that we're here to serve the public, and we are happy to take input or have discussions with anyone who has concerns at any time. And there's opportunities on the project website to be able to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to try to do our best to assist.
Hey, in regards to the actual study area and why the study area was chosen, we have a question here from a participant. Why was the roadway from I-88 interchange to the I-74? This section of roadway seems to be too busy, if not more, than the study area under the current study.
Sure. Well, you know, there's many segments of roadway throughout Iowa and Illinois and states throughout the country that certainly could use some attention. I am sure that nobody has any doubts of that. In this particular case, you know, really it kind of started with assessing, okay, are there some improvements that might be necessary to the bridge in that area? But then we also want to make sure that we're considering what's called logical termini. So we don't want to, you know, put the blinders on and say, okay, we're just focusing on this one singular spot. We want to make sure that we're capturing transportation issues throughout a corridor. So, you know, Illinois DOT does have other ongoing projects throughout the remainder of the I-80 corridor. You know, we have some bridge improvements that will be coming up at the Big X as well. Those not immediately, but we're beginning studies on that as well. And, you know, we're going to continue to do projects as funds and time allow. And in this particular case, the I-88 interchange to the east was determined to be the proper location to conclude this particular corridor study.
We have another question about, well, the sides of what's the Iowa side and what's the Illinois side. So Becky might want to just continue with this one too. What is the difference between the Illinois side and the Iowa side of the bridge? Is one direction considered Iowa versus the other would be considered Illinois, or is it the midpoint of the bridge as a dividing line?
Sure, that's a great question. So actually, Iowa and Illinois we've shared jurisdiction of the Mississippi River bridges. So the I-74 bridge, Iowa is the lead agency for that structure. We share in that 50-50. In this particular case, Illinois is the lead agency for the structure, and we still share 50-50 in that. So as far as costs, and we also share responsibility for maintenance costs and decision making and all of those various elements. But to facilitate and make things a little bit simpler, that's a determination several years ago that was made, was that we would share our responsibilities for those structures in that manner. So we're basically each taking half of what's on the border. So in this particular case, the entire structure is under Illinois as the lead agency to the Iowa side of the river, but we share in those costs, responsibilities, and decision making.
Hey, Tony, you might want to take this next one in regards to noise. With either the no build or they're calling it the new build, will there be noise abatement on the bridge?
Okay, I was having trouble unmuting, sorry.
No, this one.
So there will eventually, as the project moves forward through the project development process, there will be a noise study conducted. However, during the Pell, we won't do any detailed noise, traffic noise impact analyses. So we can't make that determination at this time. On the bridge itself seems unlikely, but that study would occur during the phase 1 portion of the project.
As we're talking about percentages of truck traffic, what is the percentage that truck traffic will increase? I'm assuming this question is really about obviously a build, so if there's expanded lanes.
Right.
Tony, you wanna take that?
Based on the forecast that we've been looking at so far, overall, we're seeing, those projections are anywhere from, I think, 10 to 50% higher in the future. And that's really, that's across the board, automobile and truck traffic. I don't believe we're seeing anything. I don't think we're seeing increases that are significantly higher on the truck at this point as opposed to autos. So just generally, and as I believe shown on that exhibit with our preliminary traffic forecast, those traffic increases are identified. But certainly the truck traffic, given that this is an interstate facility, is fairly high and does certainly contribute to affecting the traffic flow throughout the study area.
Yeah, Tony, if I could add, this structure does carry kind of a disproportionate amount of truck traffic in the Quad Cities area. Because obviously we have 5 river crossings in the Quad Cities area. One of those is the Arsenal Bridge, which isn't utilized for through traffic. But of all of and this is as of the end of 2018, so it may have changed a little bit since then, but this structure carries over 50% of the daily truck crossings in the Quad Cities area because it's a cross-country route, presumably.
So in regards to lessons learned, as far as for lessons learned on I-74, how will the I-80 bridge be built to last? Will it also be built to last 100 years? So what lessons learned have Illinois and Iowa DOTs learned from the process for I-74, and will this bridge be built to last 100 years as well? Becky, you might want to take that one.
Yeah, so I don't know that we haven't even discussed at this point what the particular parameters would be for a replacement structure. Certainly there will be discussions of, how can we best economize and serve the public with whatever structure we determine is appropriate if we determine that a structure is going to be built. And I want to just keep going back to that at this stage of the study, we're still, highly looking at a very high level and considering that, continued maintenance and no build is certainly an alternative that needs to be kept under consideration. So I think one of the great benefits that both Sam and I have is that we both spent the last decade or more of our careers being involved in that I-74 project. So we've had the opportunity to really, get to see what worked, what didn't. And so as far as lessons learned, I think the partnership that the two DOTs has developed through that has been really beneficial. I think it serves us well. The Parsons group that we've got as our consultant on this project today, they were the designers for the Savannah-Sebula project that was recently constructed, and that was also another great partnership between the two DOTs. I know that we'll be able to work together and continually reach out to the public. I think one of the great successes we had during the environmental and design phase of I-74 was our public coordination and our ability to engage the public and connect with stakeholders, and that was a huge benefit. So I know that we'll continue through those processes as we move along the project at this location as well. So Sam, I don't know if you'd like to add anything.
Sure, I agree. I think Illinois DOT and Iowa DOT have worked really well together. And I think there are lessons to be learned on the Interstate 74 project, and I think we're learning those. But at this point, like you mentioned, I think we're too early to say. We could end up just being in a long-term maintenance no-build situation right now. So until we know what type of bridge is going to best serve the area, if we need a new bridge or not, do we need a different alignment? I mean, all of those things are on the table right now. So it's probably too soon to tell what we've learned. I mean, we're going to learn a lot about basket handle arches on 74, and maybe that's not the kind of bridge that gets built here. It wasn't the one that we built in Savannah-Sebula. So we'll see.
If we have,
Sure, and
go ahead, Becky.
oh, sorry, Tracy. I just wanted to just kind of conclude to say, and I hopefully, I just want to remind attendees today that I know some of these, maybe we don't have all the answers they're looking for at this moment. So I just want to remind that really what we're doing today is introducing the project, and we want to give you the answers that we have available. But some of these, really the answer is, well, we'll see, as Sam said. So we're going to continue to stay in touch and provide information as we develop it.
I know we have quite a few other questions still. It's 3 o'clock. We'll continue on until we get all these questions answered. Tony, for phase 1, what type of environmental document will it be? Do we know yet?
We don't know. That will be determined based on the information that gets developed as part of this Pell study. And also it could, depending on how the improvements, is it one large project? Does it make sense to break any of the project off into smaller sections? That'll all be determined as we move forward. So whether it's going to be categorical exclusion, an environmental assessment, or an environmental impact statement, we don't know the answer to that question at this time.
I have a question specifically about Middle Road exit. The development at Middle Road is causing increased on and off traffic. Thinking that 2 things need to change. First, making an entrance ramp longer. Second, 4th lane to Middle Road northeast of I-80 to the Forest Grove Road. Thoughts? So Sam, I'm not sure if you want to touch on that, or if Tony.
Yeah, I can touch on it briefly because I don't want to use a lot of time talking about Middle Road when we're talking about the I-80 River Bridge. And certainly feel free, if you have questions about the Middle Road interchange, feel free to contact me directly. We have an approved interchange justification report and environmental policy document for an improvement at the Middle Road and Interstate 80 interchange. Yeah, we are aware of the development there, and we've got that in place. We just need to get the funding in place to actually construct it.
Okay. I know we have another question, I think that came in about the multi-year program and our funding secured for this part and for future parts. I think, Becky, you touched on that. There's still a moving target, if you will. So
yeah, sure. There is funding in the multi-year program. You know, these are all estimates, and as I said, things are certainly subject to change. Really, when we pull for Illinois DOT, when we publish a multi-year program, the only thing that's for sure, that's absolutely for sure, is what's in that current fiscal year. And you know, other things are subject to change. But once we see that those funds in the multi-year program, you know, typically we expect them to continue, but are subject to funding availability, as I said previously, funding availability, other roadway needs, and but at this point, the money is in the multi-year program that was published last fall, and so we do expect it to remain at this point in time.
I know this is a hot topic. It has been for a handful of years now, but in regards to autonomous vehicles, what kind of considerations will be built into the project for future development for the use of autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, at this point, and Sam can speak to I-80 DOT, but while the Illinois Department of Transportation is working on developing policies to address autonomous vehicles, we do not have those policies in hand at this point, but we certainly will continue to work hand in hand with Federal Highway Administration and you know, watching technology as it comes available. You know, we're constantly trying to stay on the edge of technology, whether it's pavement types or pavement marking or bridge condition management, et cetera. And, you know, we'll continue to do our best to address those things as they come along.
Hey, Tony, for you, oh, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
I was going to say that's true in Iowa as well. I think as a department, we're taking a pretty proactive look at automated vehicles with the caveat that knowing that technology changes all the time. So we don't want to work too hard to invest in you know, Betamax or some other format of technology that's not going to be there in the future. So like Becky said, I think, you know, keeping up with pavement markings, and I believe there's a plan through a number of organizations, commercial organizations, where they want to do more roadway monitoring ahead of your vehicle, and then information that's fed into the vehicles. And we will consider those sorts of things as part of this bridge project as well.
For Tony, regarding cultural resources, you might want to touch on this environmental question. Maybe it's too early, but will the alignment stay the same? If not, are there cultural resource issues such as the Indian mounds in the area?
Right, so we've started to gather information related to historic and cultural resources in the study area, and what we found so far is there are some archaeological sites located within the study area. We're not at a point where we know if there's going to be a new bridge, if it's going to be on a new alignment. So we don't, at this point, we don't know if we're going to impact it, but we'll certainly consider, you know, those potential impacts as we develop and evaluate alternatives here in the coming months.
In regards to property and and a build alternative. Do you plan to expand into any property not currently owned by either state? If yes, where?
We don't,
Sure. And
those,
Tony,
those,
do you want to go
oh,
first? That's fine.
yeah, I'll start, Becky, and you can, if I've missed anything, feel free to add on. But similarly to what we've been stating here, we don't have any specific alternatives to know whether or not whether or not those improvements are going to require property acquisition. That's all things that we're going to start to look at and determine as part of this project. And then if that is needed, that information will be refined as the project moves forward through the development process.
Again, about well, actually, this is more of a public involvement question. Again, maybe too early, but will the bridge design provide alternatives to input from the public, as in the I-34 project? So pretty much,
Yeah.
will stakeholders have the ability to provide input on that design? I think, Bob, you had mentioned that a while ago, but in case
Yeah.
that this
Right.
person
Right.
just came out.
I would fully expect that there would be a range of feasible bridge alternatives, and it might just come down to a preference of aesthetics, and then I'm sure the DOTs, as in past projects, will seek public input on the aesthetics and what type of bridge would fit well in that context.
Okay. In regards to if I have a property owner that is inquiring about when they'll be notified. So typically, I think, Becky, if you want to, or Tony, Sam, touch on this as far as the process goes. So when will the private property owners along the shoreline of both sides of the river that are potentially affected by the bridge replacements be contacted regarding any potential issues of their specific homes or properties? So at what stage, maybe, because I know we don't know where even an alignment's going to go right now, but if this is going to be a build alternative, at what stage will property owners be notified in regards to their actual property itself?
So when we move into the phase one environmental phase of the project, one of the things we'll be looking at is alternatives. And we'll be considering, as we said previously, the no build alternative, but when we look at build alternatives, we'll be considering whether we're using an existing alignment or alternative alignments. And so as we are developing those alternatives, there will be numerous opportunities for public input. So the last thing that any of us on a project development team want is for a property owner to be surprised by something. And we want to provide early and frequent opportunities for the public, for property owners, for stakeholders to visualize and be able to discuss with the project team the proposals that are being developed. So long before a determination is made that somebody's property may be affected by the project, we'll be reaching out to make sure that they have an opportunity to see what the alternatives are that are being discussed, and to provide them an opportunity to give input on those alternatives. Tony, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, and as part of preparing for this public meeting, we developed a distribution list that included, an information distribution list that included adjacent property owners, and possibly the person that posed that question, received a letter from the project team alerting them to the public meeting. And then that type of outreach is going to continue as the project moves forward.
In regards to structural aspects to the bridge and problems, what are the main structural problems of the bridge? Are these problems similar to those, similar to the need to close the exterior lanes in a few years? For example, if the bridge is dangerous now, you want to touch on what's the current, condition of the bridge, and then what are some of the problems you've
Right,
identified?
right. Well, the bridge has undergone maintenance, and of course, the bridge is routinely inspected for safety, and there's no indication that the bridge in any way right now is dangerous. It's completely safe as far as the best we can tell from routine inspections that are done on the bridge. The bridge has been closed in the past when there was when the inspections have shown, hey, there's some cause for concern here, and those things have been retrofitted and taken care of. I don't know if I've answered the whole question. Was it mainly about safety of the bridge? Can
Just
you?
what are the structural problems that have been identified?
Well, in the past, the cantilevers on if you're familiar with the bridge, it's a there's two main girders, and then there's some cross members, which we call floor beams. The longitudinal members are the main girders, and then the cross members are the floor beams. And those floor beams cantilever off from the sides to the sides. And if you've seen many bridges kind of like that, you don't see many bridges like this nowadays, just because bridge practice has changed and evolved over time. And but this bridge, there was some cracking, I believe, that was identified in some of those overhang members. They immediately, out of an abundance of caution, shut down that traffic, and then they did a repair contract. So it is definitely considered safe for all the traffic that's out there now. But there was some cracking in those overhang members, those overhanging members that had to be addressed and was taken care of. Did that answer the question, Tracy?
Yes, but the main point here too that you just said is that the bridge is safe
Yes.
to drive on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, it's completely safe. And the but and I think as pointed out in the video, there are traffic is expected to grow, and there's very narrow shoulders on the existing bridge. It's 2 lanes in each direction, and if there's a breakdown in one of the lanes, that causes problems. One of the things being considered would be should there be additional lanes, 3 lanes in each direction across the river, and that's all being studied in this phase. We'll have to see, and the next phase, we'll have to see where that goes. But that would be one of the reasons for modifying the structure.
Okay. Thanks, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to, as far as somebody asked, will you be creating a physical mailing list for the I-80 PAL? Yes, we have started with an initial. I think Becky mentioned that. Tony touched on that too. We've started an initial steady stakeholder list. Certainly that will continue to grow. We really encourage people to go online to the website and sign up on the mailing list, or really the email distribution list, so we can send out e-blasts. It's another way that we communicate with stakeholders. We have a question in regards to, let's see, that person's the on and off ramps need 2 lanes to allow for passage during accidents on them. I think that's more of a statement. I think we had touched on some of those attributes or considerations as we move forward in the study. Regarding,
Yeah, that's,
go ahead,
sorry,
Becky.
go ahead.
Mhm.
Oh, I was going to mention that you know, we've talked a lot about the bridge, but certainly the interchanges and how they function will be a significant part of analysis that we'll be doing when we're looking at problems and needs and improvements throughout the corridor.
Again, we still have quite a few questions here, trying to get through these. Regards to flood maps, what are the dates and sources of the flood maps are being used for the study? Do these flood maps consider the 2019 flood event? Tony or Becky?
That's a good question. I don't have that information at my disposal here for this meeting, but we certainly can look into that and, you know, provide a follow-up response there.
Okay. I think we have another question in regards regarding noise. Again, can anything be done to reduce the noise, especially for from semis?
Well, as the project moves forward, and it won't be done during the Pell study, there will be a traffic noise impact analysis completed, and as part of that, all traffic will be considered. Automobile and truck traffic will be considered, and based on the federal regulations and state policies related to noise abatement, such as noise barriers, will be considered if and where there are noise impacts identified. So definitely something that will be analyzed as part of the project, but you won't see those results in the Pell study.
And regarding the engineering consultant role of Parsons, what is their role? Becky, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So Parsons and their team of 4 sub-consultants, which includes Tracy's firm, Images, who's helping us out today as the facilitator, they were selected by the Department of Transportation, and we utilize a quality-based selection process that is in accordance with Federal Highway Administration requirements. And they were selected based on their submittal and other elements for the completion of this Pell study. When we move into the next phase, phase 1, there'll be a subsequent consultant selection, and you know, we'll continue that process as we move through the various elements of the study.
Okay. In regards to Becky and Sam, I think this might be a good one for you as well. In regards to the bridge piers, is the current set of bridge piers in good enough shape to be reused? Would you reuse them if we did go to a build with the improved deck for one side of the bridge? The I-80 with all of the other new companions, the second side built with new piers, this could potentially save a good deal of construction funds. So really, to reiterate that, are the bridge piers, could they be used if they're in good enough shape with a new deck? Is that a possibility?
Yeah,
or have you ever seen that?
We've done some preliminary investigation. I might let Bob weigh into this too, but some preliminary investigations as to the condition of the piers. And now the condition of the piers is good. There's other issues potentially with the arrangement of the piers and how that relates to whatever proposed structure configuration we need in the future. So, you know, certainly I think the statement was made in the question about cost savings, and that is a significant concern for the DOTs, and we want to be good stewards of the funds that were provided, and we're always assessing what types of things, maybe what types of innovations we can come up with to try to do things with less cost. And so, yes, that's certainly a consideration. One of the significant things we need to evaluate, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but are we going to be changing the structure width? Are we going to be needing a different alignment, or what types of other things are weighing in within the project limits? So, but certainly it is a consideration to look at what alternatives do we have with existing elements, whether it's pavement in a pavement section, or structure elements, or other things that we can economize with. So I don't know, Bob or Sam, if you have anything you want to add to that.
Well, this is Bob. I'll weigh in a little bit on that. So one of the options that is considered is that you would possibly build a companion bridge. In other words, you would keep as much of the existing bridge as possible, and maybe what that is to keep the piers, or the substructure, the part that's I think the person was mentioning. Keep that and build a new bridge on top of that, and the girders and the deck on top of that. And then the companion bridge would be an all new bridge. And then what would happen is you would have several lanes of traffic then, but only in one direction on the existing bridge, and the companion bridge will handle the other direction. There has been a history of scour problems with the existing bridge, where they have had to go in. Scour is where water in the river causes an undermining of the piers, and they have gone back in and they have put in some scour retrofit measures. They've gone in and they've done some armoring of the river bottom down there to keep the piers from being scoured out. The other thing is that the Coast Guard, they would prefer a wider navigation channel. They would be willing to live with the existing navigation channel if the piers were reused, but their first preference is to widen the channel, widen the piers. I mean, widen the space between the piers for the main navigation channel. And then there's another issue that comes up. The existing piers are 50 plus years old, and any structure we put on top of it, of course, this will be modern construction and could easily be expected to last 75 years, if not 100 years. The advances in materials and technology that we have for bridges that are constructed today lead to a much greater bridge life than what we would have expected from a bridge that was built back in the 50s and 60s. We've learned so many lessons over the past 50 years since the highway program first kicked off. So then the question is that, well, do you want to put a brand new superstructure, girders and deck, on piers that are already 50 years old? So these are all in the mix, and will be in the study and the next stage going forward. That will not be determined in this stage right now. But right now it's more of a preliminary to lead into that, but that will be answered in the next stage.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
So when we move on to the, Becky, I know that you talked about the Pell study as far as where, or actually the phases and what's funded in MYP. But somebody's asking, are we on schedule, the Pell study, and will it move to a standard phase NEPA process late in the year? specifically? I know you
That,
talked about that, so.
yeah, that's our current expectation. You know, I think all of us have undergone a lot of change over the last month. But you know, that's our expectation right now. I think, you know, with regard to the Pell, the team definitely feels that we're on schedule to wrap up the report for this phase, hopefully in September. And that's our intent. You know, the multi-year program included money for our phase 1, and our subsequent program will be published that will specify what's in the current fiscal year 2021 that'll start on July 1st. That program hasn't yet been published. When that occurs, then we'll have some more certainty as far as when phase 1 will be advertised, but that is our current schedule and plan.
Okay, another question about noise. This one's particularly about sound barriers. Could they be considered? There seems to be a lot on the south side of the bend. On the Iowa side, there's a housing area, and the noise level has increased significantly over the years. So could some type of sound barrier be considered?
Sure. Sound barriers or any other type of noise mitigation will be considered during the phase 1 portion of the project. We won't get into that level of detail in the Pell study, but during the phase 1, a full traffic noise impact assessment will be completed. Anywhere where noise impacts are identified, noise mitigation, such as sound barriers, will be analyzed to determine if they're appropriate for those particular locations.
So in regards to, this is actually a procurement method for the construction. So has a procurement method been established as a design build or a DBB, or is there a potential for design bid build, or is there potential for design build with legislation potential if legislation is potentially approved?
Well, and I think as mentioned, you know, at this point, we don't have legislation, and so the Illinois DOT is not establishing any design build projects. But so this one obviously is a design bid build expectation at this point in time, because that's what our policies accommodate. But, you know, certainly as time moves on, if those opportunities become available, I'm sure it would be a consideration. You know, that's an appropriate procedure in many cases where you have a large and complex project. And, you know, we certainly would have those discussions with Iowa DOT and Federal Highway Administration if the legislation and policy were to allow consideration.
We have a participant that is thanking us for hosting and providing this meeting. And their question is, since this project will be bridging over the river, poor soil conditions most likely exist. Is low density cellular concrete or soil improvements or soil replacements being considered during this phase? Low density cellular concrete.
Becky, do you want me to take that?
I mean, well, Bob,
Right,
I guess I'll start by saying that that's certainly, you know, I can understand the interest in that, certainly, but at this stage, because we are at such an early stage, we have not identified project elements that would really allow us to take those kinds of very specific material questions under consideration as of yet.
Right, and that might be part of something if there's a value engineering done at some point later in the studies.
Sure, and we definitely, I mean, for those who might not be familiar, value engineering is a federally guided process that we utilize to evaluate large projects and determine it from a team who has kind of a fresh set of eyes to take a look at it and see if there's opportunities for value, simply put. And so certainly of a project of this size, we would absolutely be engaging in a value engineering process and looking for those kinds of alternatives.
So the next question comes about a dashboard. When will the project be posted to the Fast 41 dashboard? So sure, is that something on the Iowa side?
I'm not aware
I'm
of
not familiar with
that.
Yeah.
We can investigate that, Tracy,
Yeah.
and provide a response later.
Okay. Okay. Okay, which DOT, Iowa or Illinois, is leading the agency, as the lead agency on this project?
Illinois is the lead agency for this project.
Just want to see, we're going through here. Some people have signed off. I'll just repeat the question here. I know that we've discussed this, but it's the bridge, the new bridge going to be built north or south of the existing bridge. I think it said we don't know that yet.
Correct. We have not evaluated whether there will be a build alternative, and if so, what that would look like.
Regarding on a replacement model plan, would it maintain the same path as the current flow, or would the big curve be taken out on the Iowa side? I think there's a couple different questions from folks in regards to that curve on the Iowa side.
I think we're still at that same point that we keep coming back to, is that we don't know yet, because we haven't determined what a potential alignment might be, or if we no build, or if we build north or south, and all of that would have an impact on the potential changes to that curve.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, it's too early.
Okay, thank you. Tony, in regards to that, going back to the crash history, is it compared to other bridges in the area like I-290 or I-280 or I-74?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're starting to evaluate how that compares to similar facilities in the area and how it compares to statewide crash rates as well. And that information will become available as we develop further as part of this analysis.
And Tony, another one for you in regards to the environmental process. Will the 4F evaluation begin in this phase or the next phase, which would be phase 1?
I missed probably the key part of that question. You said what evaluation?
The 4F.
Oh,
evaluation.
Section 4F evaluation.
Yeah, Section
sure.
4F. Mm-hmm.
So a Section 4F evaluation is done if there are potential impacts to parks or historic resources. And we're identifying potential Section 4F resources in the study area, but the official Section 4F evaluation would be conducted as part of the Phase 1 study and not as part of the Pell study.
Okay. And another one for you, Tony. What will the analysis conducted during the Pell? In other words, what specific items, resources will be evaluated? I think we touched on some of those in the video. And then on the board here, I can show that again here.
Yeah, that slide that you're turning to there shows some of the resources that we've identified in the study area. And really, we're looking at this stage, we're looking at all potential social, economic, and environmental resources, and we're looking at a similar set of resources that'll be looked at in the next phase of the study. We're just doing it at a preliminary level. We're not conducting any detailed field studies as part of this analysis. So we're taking published data and maps, information that are available in databases, and we're compiling and have compiled all of that to help us identify areas where we think might be more sensitive to preliminarily identify impacts. But then those detailed field studies where maybe you're going out and you're looking for threatened endangered mussels in the river, or maybe you're trying to determine if there are any Indiana bats in the area. Those detailed studies happen during phase 1 and not as part of the PEL.
So this is a question I think more so for the future phases, but what timeline are we looking at for input from utilities in the area?
Well, we've actually gathered utility information to try to identify major utilities that could create conflicts for any improvements we might ultimately consider in advance here. So we've already started that process. And then, as we've said, regarding multiple topics, you drill down and there'll be more and more detail as the project moves forward.
So if a new bridge is built, what is the best case scenario for the bridge to be completed? And certainly, Becky, you had mentioned timing of the different phases, but again, we're looking at just the project schedule here with PEL and phase 1 design, and then step 4 of construction. What is that best case scenario? What's the best case scenario to be completed? To be completed if a new bridge is built.
Well, it's certainly dependent on a lot of different factors. One is that, the environmental phase has to be fully developed. Typically a project of this nature takes several years to go from beginning of the environmental phase to construction. There's also land acquisition that needs to occur, and we've got many different agencies we need to complete coordination with. So, as I mentioned before, the project is funded in our 6-year program. So that is, I think an indication that there's a hope that, within the next decade, we'd be able to, or less, we'd be able to achieve that. So I think our goal certainly is that if a build alternative is determined to be the appropriate pathway, that we try to expedite that, because we do want to see these solutions move forward. And certainly if funding is allocated, we want to make sure that we're limiting escalation of costs as inflation occurs. So, Sam mentioned before that as of right now, Iowa DOT operates on a 5-year schedule, and they don't yet have construction funding. So that's certainly an element too, that, we need them to be able to be on a similar schedule based on what their funding availability and project needs are. So I think the assurance that I would provide is that we have an interest in this project, and we're going to continue to try to move it forward, and in the spirit of being good stewards of funds, trying to expedite that process as much as we can, but also ensuring that we're following the proper process and ensuring that all environmental needs and coordination occurs.
Okay. In regards to our current PEL study, can the study be shared on the site? Can the current studies be shared on the site?
Well, the study has not yet been compiled, but definitely when we have documents available to be shared, we will be doing that on the project site.
We had another one about the timing of construction. Okay, over our last few questions, it seems like it's just still trickling in here. I think there needs to be seems to be some need for more clarification as we talked about the structural issues. Becky, maybe you can clarify, and what we're studying. So I'll read the entire thing here. There seems to be more that has been considered that has been said. During the entire discussion, we've been told studies need to be done, yet it was just said during the answering question about the structural bridge issues. And that there have been a study to determine if 3 lanes in each direction were needed. So Becky, can you specifically clarify what has been studied and what has been determined or studied thus far, and where we're going to be taking that into further phases?
Yeah, well, so throughout this corridor, there have been a variety of studies and considerations for various projects. So some local people might be familiar with the reconstruction of the pavement that we did on the Illinois side that went up to the bridge and to a point that's a bit west of the I-88 interchange, and that was, I can't remember the exact date, but it was approximately a decade ago or in that range. And so when we studied that particular project at that time, one of the things that was noted was that we were identifying a need for 3 lanes in each direction for that particular study. And then Iowa is also working on a study that's on their side of the river that extends, from the area west of the structure to I-280. And so there's multiple studies that have been done with regard to the bridge itself, as far as structural elements there, what kind of possibilities there are. And some of these are kind of high level, what we would call feasibility studies that were done over the past several years as there was internal discussion about what the future might bring and what things we might need to do to maintain this very important interstate facility. So those pieces of information do come into consideration, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel, as it were. So if we have those pieces of information, we do try to bring them into additional studies. But I do want to be very clear that this study is independent of those things. So where we may look at that data and we may assess, well, is that still applicable? Have our traffic volumes changed? Have our needs changed? And how do those things come into play? We're trying to utilize the information that's available, but we're also trying to make sure that we are giving this corridor an independent evaluation as to what are the needs, the transportation needs for the corridor as a whole, and how do we need to address those. So I hope I kind of answered the question. Tracy, if you think you need to redirect you, please feel free.
No, I think that was very, very much answered that question. So thank you. So one last question that we have from a participant is, when is the next public meeting expected to take place?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you for sure is that there will be more public meetings. We do not have a subsequent public meeting scheduled at this point in time, but everybody has the opportunity to sign up for our mailing list. And, whenever we determine that that's going to occur, we will definitely be reaching out. Generally, my expectation is that it'll probably be near the beginning of our phase 1 process, perhaps. And so, you know, it might be early next year, but that could change as well. And so my best suggestion is to make sure you're signed up for that mailing list, and that way we can reach out to you when that future meeting occurs. But as we said before, there's always, whether we're having a meeting or not, we want your input. We want you to contact us. Please make sure that if you have concerns, reach out to us, because we're here to help.
Okay, great. I'm just trying to go back to that. There's one other question in regards to that FAST 41. Oh, here it is. So that's the FAST 41 is a Title 41 of the FAST Act. It's used to coordinate environmental reviews. So the question was, will this project be posted on that dashboard? So if we still need to look into that, we can respond directly to this participant, but I just wanted to circle back to that.
I think we need to get a little bit more information about that, but generally, from what my understanding is, that particular location will depend on the level of environmental processing. So whether, you know, we talked a little bit earlier, Tony mentioned, I think, about, you know, whether it's a categorical exclusion, an environmental assessment, or an environmental impact statement. And we won't make that determination until we get into phase 1. And then once those processing levels are determined, that's when the determination is made of placing that on that list. So that is not going to occur during the Pell study. You know, we are not making decisions in this phase with regard to preferred alternatives or that type of nature. It's really a data gathering purpose in this particular phase.
Okay, well, thank you for that concludes our Q&A session. Please remember to provide comments by May 6th. Those that we do receive by this date will become part of the public meeting record. Like I mentioned at the top of the virtual meeting, that the participants will automatically receive a survey directly to their inbox once they log out. Please respond to those 3 very important questions, and then visit our website to keep up with the up-to-date information. Sign up on the mailing list if you haven't already. Thank you for participating, and this now concludes our virtual public meeting.